Hello, and welcome back to Devlog. In this series, we're developing payroll software from scratch. And in this episode, we're implementing the profile page and displaying all of the user's information. Alright, first up, we're going to work on displaying employment information on the profile page. Let's head over there and start working on a simple component. We can reuse the base card that all components use and add a header. From there, we'll want to map out the various information we want to display using a simple grid. For now, I can think of displaying the employee ID, occupation, start date, pay group, tax province, and company email. Alright, let's make those bold, and then we can use some temporary information to see how it looks. Now to populate this component with actual information, we'll grab everything we need from the session's employee object. Just like that, we have access to the employee ID, their department, occupation, and everything else. Alright, so here's what it looks like with the info grabbed from the database. Pretty simple, yet pretty clean. And of course, we can translate it to French as well. Very cool, let's push these changes up and we are done with this component, at least for now. We handled employment information and now it's time for personal information. Right underneath, we'll duplicate the base card with a new header, and for this component, we'll opt to use text fields for most of the info, just so we can easily support updating personal information in the future. For the basics, I can think of including fields for first and last name, SIN, and date of birth. For the user's address, we can include the street, city, and postal code, and we'll want to grab a drop-down component from Flowbyte to use for province. Some modifications to make it match everything else, and it looks good. Works as expected. We can select our province, Saskatchewan. And finally, for contact info, we can include home phone, cell phone, and the user's personal email. To make some of this information available, we'll need to update the database, which means we then need to update the route file. This is not a good process, but we'll make it 1,000 times better in a few minutes, right after I deal with this broken migration. Alright, good as new, we can now grab the personal information we need from the session and pre-populate the text fields. Alright, very cool, works as expected. I also need to update the types of the session object, which makes the process even worse, but I promise I'll fix this shortly. But let's get all the fields going first. Here's date of birth, and for the few remaining ones, we'll need to add them to the database schema. I'll make them optional for now, just so the migration does not explode. I promised I'd fix it, so here we are. The session type is now super clean and updates according to the schema, and the route just appends the employee and user objects to the session. With some cleanup here and there, the code is looking pretty decent and we have all the fields that I can think of. So here's the final component, displaying all of the user's personal information in an organized grid. I populated the dropdowns with all of the possible options using ChatGPT and set some better placeholders for the text fields. As always, let's push these changes up. Oops, I forgot. Here's what it looks like in Francais. Everything still fits, and the drop-down options also translate. Nice, one more ticket in the bag. Let's move on to creating a quick info component for the profile page. Before we begin, let's quickly put the greeting header on the profile page as well. Cool, looks pretty good. And now we'll want to basically copy the quick info card from the home page and change the fields to information that the user would likely be looking for on their profile. I think we'll want to display the employee ID, their department, pay group, and tenure. To calculate the user's tenure, we'll subtract the current date by the employee's start date and divide that by how many milliseconds are in a day, and just like that, we can see that I have worked at Nobility Pay for 3 days. Perfect. I realized that we currently store pay frequency on the organization, which means that all employees have the same pay group, but that's not very flexible, so we can remove it from the organization model and instead add it to the employee model. Run the migration and it breaks. Not to worry, I fixed the migration and now we have all the information we need. Let's push these final changes up and we are done with this sprint. Let's take a look at the final results. It's looking fantastic. I think that's about it for the profile page, unless you guys have ideas for what to add to it. Otherwise, we can move on to another exciting feature in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Devlog. I hope you enjoyed and maybe learned something along the way. I have definitely learned a ton since starting this series. So make sure to subscribe to follow along and see where this project goes. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.